Shane, we're going to talk about we're going to creating good habits and recognizing what they are. But before we do that, could you give the good people a little introduction to you and what you're all about and why we're here having this conversation?
Absolutely. Well, my name is Shane Cook. I've been a chef for 22 years in many different parts of the industry, events, restaurants, hotels, the whole kit and caboodle. Most recently in contract catering. So I've been in a lot of different areas. Now, I formed a company called Jasper Wellbeing at the end of 2019 when I won the Acorn Scholarship. And part of the reason behind that was because of my ideas for mental health and well-being within the industry.
We're here to give insight and information, and today we're going to talk about boundaries. What have you got for me, Shane?
So boundaries, often something we don't see as something that we should do. Now, what are boundaries? So boundaries are where we put things in place, or habits in place, so to speak, where we are creating a harmony between work and between home life. And with all the different jobs we do, there's many different ways of doing this. You know, some of us work long hours, some of us work less hours. So, you know, there's very much different ways of how we put boundaries into place. Now, a lot of the time when we don't have boundaries, our home life does suffer. A lot of the time we don't notice it because we're working so hard and we're so engrossed in work. But the reality is, when we do have boundaries, it helps us to focus on life as well. And if we have a balance or a focus on our home lives, that only makes us work better when we're actually at work.
Mm-hmm.
When we have boundaries, it is something that helps us build our resilience, which is fact. When we have boundaries and we have that kind of harmony between life and work, it helps to build resilience, which is so important for when certain things happen. So we've got a different kind of mindset on things and how we react to things, and how we deal with them. So there's a lot that boundaries can do for us. They can lessen stress. And most importantly, if we've got a spouse, we're not getting in trouble all the time. You know, if
I
we're
mean, that's a win, isn't it?
exactly. So boundaries are good. And you know, in hospitality, we work. A lot of us work long hours. So when we talk about boundaries, we often think, well, there can't really be any boundaries. What does boundaries mean? That we have to have all this time off work, and as much time off work is brilliant. That's great, but the reality is, for the industry to work, a lot of us do have to work long hours.
Mm-hmm.
So boundaries isn't about having a exact kind of exact amount of hours at home or exact amount of hours at work. Boundaries could be seen in many different ways, as I said. So boundaries could be, look, if you need to work 16, 18 hours, generally what I used to do when I did that is I'd get home, and I'd start writing my list for tomorrow. I'd start thinking about work for the next day. And the last thing I thought before I went to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning was work in the morning. Now, I see now that although during them times I was getting a lot done and it was great, but it had a massive impact on my well-being. Now, when we create boundaries between work, so what that means is, as to simplify this, we make a boundary to say, when I get home, there's no phone, there's no looking at emails, there's no writing mise en place list, there's no phoning people from work to talk about the day.
Mm-hmm.
It's a complete switch off, an absolute complete and not 100% switch off. And
Is that possible, do you think?
yes, it is, because it's happened, and it's about making sure it happens. So look, many of us go home, right? So say office workers or even working in contract catering, going going home at 5 o'clock, which I've done for a very long time, one thing I do is keep looking at emails till 10 o'clock at night and doing stuff. We can carry on doing that. Don't leave your phone on. Create a boundary
Hmm.
and turn it off. Let people know I'm not answering my phone after 7 o'clock. It's not happening. Do you get what I mean? So it's like
Absolutely.
we had a conversation about habits. So to change boundary, to put boundaries in place, we can use changing habits to make sure then boundaries come into play.
Yep.
You know, social media, such a time waster when it comes to your spare time, looking at our phones. So yeah, creating boundaries between both, having cut-off points for certain things, so we can actually concentrate on being at home and enjoying it, whatever that may be. Um, not having boundaries is at the end of the day, it is a catalyst for stress, anxiety.
So I
Um,
was just thinking, so that idea that kind of you're getting home, you're leaving work at 5, you're getting home and you're still looking at emails until sort of 10 o'clock in the evening. What impact is that having on potentially on your life?
well, it's just one your home life. It shouldn't encroach at the end of the day because you're not putting your effort into yourself and your self care. And if you have a family, your family, and it can lead to major stress. Um, uh, Often people think they need to be doing this. So that's down to the business to put business boundaries in place.
Yep.
We don't want anyone sending emails after this time. We don't want people phoning after this time, and giving them the tools as well to say, well, rather than sit there on your emails, why don't you come up with a hobby, come up with something that you can do every night with the family? And again, that comes back to putting habits in place, which mold with boundaries. And honestly, there's so many people I can tell you, Kieran, out there that I've spoke to that feel that they have to work after they get home because it's not pushed enough within the workplace to switch off.
So how can we influence workplaces to make that change? Because if there is that kind of implicit expectation that you're going to do this and that you're going to be a part of that chain, if you're the one person who's saying, you know what, I'm no more. I'm going to focus on my family. So if you feel like you're the only person who's going to make that decision, first of all, that requires incredible bravery for a lot of people. How can we potentially start to influence the business around us to sort of change those behaviors and that expectation?
Well, you can be very brave, like you said, and do that. And what it might actually cause is a chain reaction. But what I would suggest is to actually go to the manager if you are not the manager, or go to the manager or the boss, whatever form that might be, and actually speak to them first. If you want to do stuff like that, you can speak to people like me, and I'll give you that information that you can take to your boss to say, if we do this, this is how good it's going to impact. If we put these boundaries in place, this is how it's going to impact the business in a good way. This
Yep.
is how it's going to impact our personal lives. And when our personal lives and our work are separated, the outcome of performance when we do get to work is going to be much higher, and we'll probably get much more done, which means we are performing better, which means money saved, which means better health, which means more influence from individuals to help grow the business.
It's funny, it comes back again to what we talked about in habits. It's all about the benefits. So when you're having that conversation with that line manager, with that leader, what are the benefits to you? What are the benefits to the wider business?
That's it. That's it. Exactly. It does always come back to that. And so there's been many studies um, conducted that do suggest that people who have boundaries in place and workplaces that have boundaries in place, the mental health and well-being of of their whole business is generally better. And you'll find them on Google or whatever. There's a lot of studies, and it's just facts. It's facts that these boundaries are so important because at the end of the day, the good for having boundaries far outweighs the bad. And if we're a business that thinks we can't introduce boundaries in place for the well-being of our staff, if we're one of them businesses that thinks no, there's so much work to do. They need to do it when they get home. Then really need to start thinking about the impact it's having on them. And actually, is there enough? Have you got enough staff? If people are having to do this, then is there enough staff? Are the right people working there? Are the people happy working there? Because there's loads of things that people need to. If you need your staff to work out of work, there's some serious problems there because it should never happen. And even in any industry,
It definitely leads to some questions, doesn't it?
best performance comes from having the best performance, and optimum wellness comes from balance in all aspects. And that can even come into home life. If you've got balance between work and life, you need to look at balance of, I know a couple of people who they don't have balance in life because they're always doing stuff for other people. So
Yeah.
this person, their mental health suffers because they never put a balance between, they say yes to doing stuff for everyone. And as nice as it is, it's affecting that person's mental health. So that person needs to put some balance in there because even though they've got balance between work, the point of having that balance between work is for your well-being. So you've got that optimum performance and well-being, but then there is no boundaries anymore because it's often like you finish work and then you're starting to do everything for everyone else. So it's almost like you're carrying on with work and not getting. So balance can come in many forms, and it's not just about balance between work and home life. There can be balance we need to create in a lot of different aspects.
So there's a couple of things there, isn't there? I think work-life balance is one of those things that everybody's been talking about for quite some time now. But from my perspective, I just don't think you can compare. So I can't compare my work-life balance to your work-life balance. You can't compare to the next person, to the next person, to the next person.
This is brilliant. Everyone's work-life balance is different to how that can support them as a person for their well-being. Now, I want to bring this other point in as well, which kind of works into this. Specialists often say you need to have 7 or 8 hours sleep to be well. I'm gonna might be controversial here, but I don't think it's a fact. If you wake up feeling refreshed, even if you only have 2 hours sleep, it's about how you feel for your body.
Yep.
Everything is different. So it's the same concept with. I know one guy who's a chef, and this guy is healthy as hell, and he literally only he sleeps 4 hours a night, but that's his body, how his body likes it. If he
Yep.
sleeps more, he actually feels worse. So 4 hours he's learned is his perfect
Yep.
amount of sleep, and it's the same with work-life balance. It's what works for you, and if you're in a business that the work-life balance doesn't work for you and your well-being, your mental health, then it's your duty to take ownership of that and look for what does. Because
Yeah.
if the place functions in that way for it to work, but it doesn't align with what you want your boundaries to be, then it is simple. Just have that conversation and say, I need something to align with what my boundaries need to be, rather than allowing yourself to diminish mentally, physically. So everyone's different. It's about working out what fits for you and what aligns.
That's the key, isn't it? We're all individuals, and certainly in hospitality, the joy of us is we are a united kind of collective, but we are so individual in the way that we approach life, the way that we kind of the way that we work, the way that we operate. We may have that kind of some shared values that run through it, but what works for me doesn't necessarily work for you. So that idea of kind of how much sleep do you need? I have a guy that I coach who will operate perfectly on 6 hours sleep. 6 hours sleep is ideal. And like your man, if he goes over that 6 hours, he's useless, absolutely useless. For me, I quite like a nice solid 7.5 hours sleep. It works for me. So I find a way of making sure that in my life I can build in 7.5 hours sleep that doesn't impact my life in a negative way.
Exactly. And when you want to when you're thinking about your boundaries and what works for you, it's good to understand what your why is as well in life, and what you want out of it. Um, as an example, I went from working in a two-star actually to working 18 to 20 hours a day, and I thought it affected me massively, my mental health and my health and everything. And I thought, this isn't for me. I need to put some boundaries in. What can I do? And I actually swapped to contract catering
Yeah.
and to create the boundaries. So it wasn't about I'd failed. Like a lot of people say, if I do this, if I change this, I've failed. You're not failing, because what we've got to remember in life as well is our job is not our number one that we should think about, which is, as in our industry, it's all about job. We need to remember our life and our health is most important, because with our life and health being most important, we do become better at our jobs.
For
And
sure.
we will be more successful when everything aligns. So yeah, it's taking ownership with what those boundaries are and what works for you and what aligns with you as a person. Anyone who says, you have to have this amount of sleep, or you have to do this, or you have to do that, I feel is total nonsense. Everyone is different. You're the only person who can work that out.
I think you make a great point there as well about failure. It's failure is what we frame it to be. So
Yes,
for some people, they would say, you know what, leaving a two-star kitchen to go and work in contract catering, you failed. From your perspective, you're looking at it and thinking, well, actually, in contract catering, my life is working a lot better. I'm genuinely happier. My family are genuinely happier. Just point out to me where the failure is.
exactly. It's because they didn't see it as, okay, you've gone from this to this, but actually, I was working for an ex-Michelin star chef in that kitchen anyway. So I
Yeah.
was swapping it I'd found my balance, and that was to create good food, but work half the hours for my well-being, mental health, my family. So that's how I found my balance. And we need to stop seeing. Um, you make a great point. We need to stop seeing things as failure when we want to swap our lifestyles, because we're not conforming to the typical bravado of what we should be or what a chef should be.
Yeah.
You know, it's not failure. It's actually winning, because winning is when we win in life in
And when
general.
we're happy.
And when we've got boundaries that work in harmony, that is a win. Is to work in harmony. If you can work 18 hours a day, but your life is great, your well-being's great, and your family are happy, you've nailed it. That's your boundaries. You don't
Full
need
power.
exactly, and that works. So not many people think about it like that. And we need to really think about it, because there's such a broad spectrum of what boundaries are, and it's important. I hope that people see this and realize that if you are struggling with those long hours and it is affecting you, that it is not failure for you to find something which aligns. Because number one is this, because this is the this is the roots of everything. That is your life. That is your wellness. That is your home life. That is your performance at work. That word I said before, healthy, high performance.
Yeah.
No point in performing and not being healthy, because you're not actually performing. You know, number
I love
one,
that.
look after.
Absolutely love that. I think that for me is a great place to finish. You've hit the mark beautifully there. Um, recognize kind of what it is that makes you happy, and recognize that when you've got that happiness, then you're winning at life. That's it. That's what we need to be aiming for.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Perfect, mate. Thank you very much for your time on that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.